we're encouraging schools to ask better questions. Not just what kind of experience do we need, but actually what kind of culture are we building? And therefore, what kind of leadership will take us there?
You're listening to the Blue Skies Leadership Podcast, featuring discussions with international school leaders about the future of education. The podcast embodies the spirit of reciprocity by sharing strategies and change initiatives from leading schools around the world. Here are your hosts, Dan Kerr and Daniel Mendes.
You know, today we have Pauline on our show from ISS, and it makes me think about recruitment and how many wonderful stories we all have about recruitment. What's your story about recruitment that you like to share?
Oh, Daniel, I have so many from both sides of the table, but I think the one that I want to talk about today has to do with a young teacher who's not so young anymore. But when I met this person, probably in 2014, it's interesting. They came up to the table and their CV wasn't as polished as you think it might be. And sometimes as leaders, you get enamored with what's on a CV and you forget about the intangibles. But there was something about the way this person talked about kids and the joy that just came out of them when they spoke about student achievement and seeing kids inside and outside of the classroom and being a surrogate father to this person. And I just had to have this person on my faculty. It's the whole you are the weather thing. You knew this person was going to instantly bring a positive culture impact to the hallway. So 10 years later, after working with that person over 2 different schools, I'm now on the hunt to bring them to SSIS, and hopefully I'll get them at one point.
Oh, that's awesome. For me, one of my fondest memories was I'm Canadian, so I went to the recruitment fair and I was being interviewed by this head of school who was American. And it was my first introduction to how administrators in America approach recruitment. And so it caught me off guard when he asked me, so what are you certified to teach? And in Canada, I'm certified to teach from grade 6 all the way to grade 12.
Right.
And it caught me off guard. And I looked at him and I said, children? Like, it was one of those situations where I was like, I don't know where this question is going. And then he finally said, no, you're certified social studies or science. And I was like, oh, I guess I am certified to teach physical education and science and social studies. But it was so weird to be asked, like, what are you certified to teach? I'm like, dogs, cats? I don't know what it was. So
children.
I'm super excited about our conversation with Pauline today.
Yeah, let's get started. Welcome, Pauline, to the show.
Today, we're thrilled to have a guest who truly understands the heartbeat of international education. It's people.
That's right, Daniel. Today, we're joined by Pauline O'Brien, Director of Global Recruitment, Strategy, and Leadership. With over 20 years of experience, Pauline has been instrumental in shaping how international schools find, develop, and retain their most valuable asset, their talent.
Pauline's experience isn't just about filling roles. It's about building inclusive, aspiring leadership programs, designing innovative recruitment strategies, from competency-based methods to star profiles. She's a true architect of talent.
And her impact extends far beyond recruitment. Pauline is a global speaker, a strong advocate for women in leadership, and has made significant contributions to child protection through her work with the International Task Force for Child Protection. She's a mentor and a coach to countless school leaders and teachers.
Originally from Ireland and now residing in the Netherlands, Pauline brings a rich global perspective to our conversation. We're excited to learn from her insights on fostering strong leadership and resilient teams in our international schools community. Welcome, Pauline.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for having me on the show and for your patience in getting me here. I really appreciate that. You've been wonderful in being flexible around your schedules.
Pauline, you and I go back a long way. So for me personally, this is a thrill to have you on the show. So let's jump right in. I have a wonderful first question, and it's around the idea of a blue sky vision of schools. Where is the world of international schools heading, and maybe where should it be heading? And what should we all be prioritizing to bring this vision to life? What do you think?
Yeah, blue sky thinking. When I think about blue sky vision for international schools, I see something profoundly human. Schools where connection isn't a side benefit, it's the foundation. And schools that value belonging as well as well-being, as much as academic excellence. Because to me, these things are not in opposition, they're interdependent. Clearly, we're in a time of change. The world our students are stepping into is unpredictable, fast moving, we all know that, and deeply interconnected. And so the purpose of international education needs to be broader than just academic success. Now, I know that's no news to you, but you asked my vision. This is what I think. I think we need to be preparing young people to lead with curiosity, empathy, and adaptability. And yes, we still want strong outcomes. You know, we want students who can think critically and access top universities and have amazing careers. But more than that, we want young people who understand who they are, how they learn, and how they contribute. And this means that our schools must reflect those same values. And so where are we headed? So I would say hopefully towards systems where leadership is values-led, where academic goals are clear, but delivered through relational, inclusive practices, where professional growth is not a tick box, but a true commitment, and where every educator, whether they're teaching in a classroom or leading a school, feels a deep sense of purpose and support. And it's no secret for you guys who know me, you know, relationships are everything to me. You know, you can build everything on a foundation of a strong relationship. I don't think my answers will be a surprise to you.
Well, they're not necessarily a surprise, but they sure are heartwarming. I mean, you are speaking our language. Daniel and I talk about this ad nauseum in our day-to-day lives.
Not only did you say it so eloquently, we want to create great humans in this world. Yeah. What you just said laid out that foundation.
You know, particularly now, I think where we are in the world and what we're seeing, what can we rely on? And it's, you know, human nature and human kindness and human input. And so if we focus on those things, they're things we can do something about. So how do we make sure we do use that quality of human interconnections?
What are some of the innovations or blue sky strategic initiatives that are being talked about globally at ISS?
Of course, we're seeing a shift play out globally, and I'm proud that we're responding with agility and intention. A big part of my role involves working with schools and boards to rethink recruitment. I'm going to talk about my area just for now. And, you know, we don't want to see recruitment as a seasonable scramble, but it has to be a strategic investment from all who are involved in recruitment. We're encouraging schools to ask better questions, not just what kind of experience do we need, but actually what kind of culture are we building? And therefore, what kind of leadership will take us there? So really trying to shift here's the position announcement. Here are the tasks that need to be carried out, CV, application or whatever, but really the deeper dive and really working closely with boards and leadership teams to look at that, to really say, okay, what is the purpose? What are we trying to achieve here? You know, and we've really moved beyond that, just placing people. We're encouraging leadership to seek coaching and to have boards help leaders seek coaching when they take up their new roles. And not because they're not able to do the role, but just to have a sparring partner, right? To have someone to listen to them and to reflect back on what they're hearing and to support them as they take up these all important and very full, busy, intensive roles. We are supporting the onboarding processes are robust. I saw some practice when I came into international education 11 years ago that it was kind of placement and done and move on. And that was surprising. For me as a professional recruiter, it's really important to continue those relationships and continue to make sure that the person you've placed has gone into the environment they thought they were going into, that you're keeping a finger on the pulse to make sure that everything is okay in that new environment. So it's not just placement, move on. It's a relationship. It's a long-term partnership and making sure that people are in the environment that they thought they were coming into, and also helping and keeping boards accountable for, you know, the promises they may have made or the contract they've signed, you know, to keep them to that.
I have two things that I want to just quickly touch on. You mentioned the word coaching, and for listeners out there, Daniel just finished an advanced degree in executive coaching. What do you think about that? Is that something that warms your heart? Sometimes you get to a leadership position and you're like, okay, I've reached the pinnacle perhaps, and I don't need anybody in my corner. But coaching is such a huge part of anybody's growth.
Absolutely, Dan. It's super important. You know, it gets to the heart of what truly empowers educational leaders and educators in today's dynamic environment. In our profession, we're constantly engaged with a deep, complex curriculum. Much of our focus is rightly on the surface, like the subject and the skills and the content that we teach, the strategies we implement, the policies we navigate. However, there are profound underlying foundation courses of who we are that are always running in the background.
Right.
These are the deeper layers of being that fundamentally influence how we teach, how we lead, how we effectively adapt to the constant currents of change. This is precisely why coaching, and particularly ontological coaching, which I'm doing, is so crucial. It's not about adding more to your plate. It's about providing the space to explore and understand these deeper layers, the fundamental ways you interpret the world, the emotions you inhabit, and the actions that you take. By consciously examining and reshaping these ways of being, you gain an immense power to navigate every transition with greater resilience, clarity, and also impact, moving beyond simply managing change to truly transforming your experience and leadership within it. So it's super important to have a coach.
Yeah. No, I love the idea that you guys are focusing on that. And the other thing with regards to specific to teacher and leadership recruitment, how can candidates maybe best represent themselves while applying for a new position? Like, do you have advice or strategies for candidates, whether they're teachers or leaders, as they look to enter into this process?
There's no question that the hiring landscape has changed. Schools aren't just hiring for skill, they are hiring for fit, and they're hiring for alignment and what I'm calling relational intelligence.
Oh, talk more about that.
I often say to candidates, you encourage your students to reflect on their learning, so you need to do the same. Like when you bring it back to student learning with teachers, they go, oh yeah, of course, yeah. So how are you doing that yourself?
Right.
Teachers, leaders need to be able to articulate their value and their impact, and not just as a list of achievements, but as a story. And we're seeing that more and more, aren't we? That people are saying, tell us your story. And initially people are going, tell you my story. What do you mean about my story, right? But if you can turn your career into your story, where you do come with your challenges, your opportunities. Anyone out there knows me for talking about the STAR method, the situation, task, action, result, and how do you weave all of those things into a story? And I spend a lot of time at ISS talking to candidates about, okay, so if you were to articulate that in like 30 seconds or a minute, what would that look like? Because that's all you have during that interview. So it's not that you're sitting down and saying, right, we've got a half an hour, let's have a cup of tea and I'll tell you my story. I'm Irish, I can go on for a long time. But, you have to be able to be succinct and be purposeful in what you want to bring across. And I think it's also important that it's not just about impact and list of achievements. What difference have you made, for instance, in student learning? How have you helped a team grow? What challenges have you navigated with integrity? And then share examples of that through your story. And it's not only about self-promotion. I call that, it's about professionalism. That's professionalism. When you can do that, you're showing the professional side of yourself. And it's been able to speak about your practice with clarity and confidence. I think schools are looking for people who know their craft, who understand their contacts, and who lead, again, with humility and purpose. And you'll always hear me repeat that. The humility piece is important. And that's where people say, oh, well, I'm too humbled. I don't want to sell myself, is all I hear, right? I don't want to sell myself. You're not selling yourself. You're articulating your skills and competencies and attributes, through a professional lens.
I love that reframing. That's resonating a lot with me right now. And I love the idea of creating your career through a story. And it's hard for some people sometimes to sit in an interview and they feel like they're either being arrogant, overconfident, bragging about the accomplishments that they've had over their career. But really, if you weave it into a story and reframe it around professionalism, that just this is who I am, and this has been my journey, it's maybe an easier step into for some people.
I just find that when you hear someone's story, you are painting a picture rather than stating out facts of what you can do. And it just tells a lot more about that person. And does that story mesh with the journey that school is on? And it's always about that fit. You have one of my favorite humans in your organization, Michelle Kuhns, and I know that she offers a lot of professional development around curriculum, but I'm just wondering if you could tell us about the professional development opportunities at ISS. What wonderful things are you up to in that?
I'm going to dare to say that we're reshaping what professional learning looks like.
Nice.
Okay. Tell us more.
We're offering everything from leadership cohorts and coaching to focus workshops on timely topics. Whether it's social emotional learning, navigating ethical AI use in education, or inclusive recruitment strategies. We have a team that has their ear to the ground, who are well connected globally and who are listening to everyone in school to say, what professional development do you need? Typically, it was only faculty who enjoyed, or leadership who enjoyed professional learning. And we're saying everyone in the school deserves professional learning. So how do we make that happen? How can we do it in a way that is efficient for schools, for time, time in schools, but also for budgets? I mean, let's face it. Schools have been looking at how they allocate funds to professional learning to make sure it's equitable. Good schools are doing that as well. How is it equitable that everyone is benefiting? There are plenty of resources out there for professional learning. Which one suits our needs best? We have what we call a passport, right? And you have a school passport. So it means everyone in your school can follow all of the courses all of the time. Or you can have an individual passport, same thing. People can go do that. And it is also about the cost of this passport is for what you're getting is nothing, really. I know what goes on in the background, and I argue against this sometimes because it takes up so much resource, right? And I'm thinking, okay, but we have to get a return on investment. We have to at least break even, folks. There's my business mind coming in. But I appreciate the heart of the educators who want to say, no, we need to give this for free. We need to give it away. There's lots of different courses on there. Our team has really looked at all sorts of ways in which we can support the staff. For instance, all of our courses, you can put subtitles up in 230 languages. The latest offering we have is a course for teaching assistants, and it has been written by teaching assistants for teaching assistants with, of course, the expertise of our team and so on. So again, looking at a need, our professional learning really took off in COVID because I believe we were one of the first who jumped on to support teachers in how they should teach online. And we have phenomenal people on our team. You've mentioned one of them. Dr. Dana Specker-Watts is the leader of this team. And she is passionate about professional learning. So passionate that she would give it all away for free if she could. Through all of our connections, we're always out and about listening to how can we support, what problems are folks trying to solve in schools, and which courses should we be offering to address that. And I don't want to appear that we're like just touching on the surface of everything and we're doing everything and being everything to everybody. Not at all. It's like surface courses and then deeper dives can be offered afterwards. But I think we really are doing a lot in that world. And we're seeing that, educators are not looking for generic training anymore. They want spaces to reflect and connect and to learn with others who are facing similar challenges. They want PD that recognizes the emotional and strategic complexity of the roles they're in. And we hope to achieve that through our offerings. And, for school leaders, the job is isolating.
Yeah.
It is. And so creating communities of practice and offering meaningful mentorship and giving leaders a chance to pause and refocus, that's where real growth happens. And when leaders grow, their schools grow. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. This
is a perfect segue into a question I'm really interested to ask you. You touched on a couple of trends that have been happening over the last couple of years to do with belonging and social emotional health and well-being. And I think that your PD is certainly heading in that direction. Are there some key trends that you see in your global viewpoint that the future of international school is heading? And looking ahead, do you envision some challenges or opportunities for international schools in the next decade with these trends and challenges, or is it really exciting?
A few things that are standing out to me right now is emphasis on culture. Schools that thrive have strong relational adult cultures. You can't create a high-performing student culture without a healthy, connected staff culture behind it. You need that staff culture. Recruitment is more values-driven. I've said that already, but I'm going to repeat it because I really want people to understand that who are listening to this podcast as well as they go into the next school year and perhaps think about recruitment. Over the summer, they'll have the time to relax a little, hopefully, and think about this. More values-driven. What does that mean? What are my values? How are they important to my school currently? How do I be the best person in my current school if I'm staying? And are my values being met? Am I meeting the values of the school as well? And then if you're moving on to a new position, thinking about that as well, like, will I be supported? Will I grow? Am I growing? Am I being supported? Will I be seen? Am I being seen? So if you're staying or leaving, these are questions we're encouraging folks to ask. One thing I've realized around international education, mostly a kind industry, if I can call it that. People are giving and generous of time and kind. And with that doesn't always come the clarity questions or the deep dive questions, because one wouldn't want to offend or put an awkwardness in a situation by asking maybe a deep dive question that's really important or might be perceived as awkward. The more we can practice that, the more we can. And also I want to talk about interviewers in a minute, and I'll get back to that in a second. I think the tension between innovation and sustainability, schools want to innovate, but they're also tired. There's so much innovation. And particularly if you're in a well-resourced school, it seems to me at times that it's something new after something new after something new.
Yes.
And that's hard because leaders then are stretched. So I think the challenge is, how do we grow in a way, again, I'm coming back, that feels human? And how do we implement change without burning people out? And retention is a huge issue. Keeping people is directly tied to how they're welcomed. It goes back to that. That is so important. How are people welcomed into a community? And then how are they grown? And then how are they treated when things get hard? How are people treated? And that goes for teachers and leaders. How is a board treating school leaders and head of school when things get hard? There's a massive opportunity here to rethink onboarding, mentorship, leadership development, and long-term strategic planning. And, at ISS, we can help in multiple ways around those areas as well. We talked a little bit earlier around, how candidates should show up, the things they should be thinking about. I would also like to encourage people to think about who's sitting on the opposite side of the table conducting these interviews. So it's one thing that a candidate prepares well, does their research, is ready, and then the person on the other side of the table hasn't. That can be so off-putting. I often say to people, particularly when we're interviewing online, remember there's a number of faces interviewing, right? Because you'll have a panel or you'll have a number of a search committee or whatever that is, but there's only one person on the other side of the screen, and they're trying to navigate everybody, throwing questions at them, digging deeper. How do we make sure there's psychological safety? And I'm going to use that as an interview starts. How do we really set the tone, the journey of that interview so that people feel comfortable and that they can bring their best selves? Gone are the days that you just fire questions at people to try and catch them out. I would like to think we've moved beyond that. The more prep we can give to candidates coming into an interview situation, that they know what to expect. Are we doing behavioral questions now? Are we doing context questions now? Are we looking at scenarios now? The more we can introduce that to candidates, I believe, is when we get the best out of them. And yes, there are those who are polished and well-versed and whatever. On the deep dive questions we should be able to identify that as well.
I've noticed in the last, I'd say 10 years, people have become more comfortable with Google Meet and Zoom. What I've found to be the trend, there are more interviews with that individual over time, and more people are also involved. It could be the head of a department, a grade level team. What are your thoughts on that? Because I remember the old recruitment fairs where I had one or maybe two interviews with administrator in a hotel room, like that whole scenario. And now we're making these decisions over months rather than just a weekend or 2 weekends.
I am thrilled that we're not making decisions in hotel rooms anymore.
Right.
I can just maybe share a small story. When I joined Council of International School, CIS, way back when, leading their recruitment operation when they were doing recruitment. And I was told about these recruitment fairs. And I was like, okay, great. Then I was told, yes, the interviews take place in guest bedrooms. And I was like, what? Excuse me? Could you, sorry? And then I was told about these stories, and everyone has a story about a guest bedroom and a candidate. And I've heard some in my time that I'm like, oh my goodness, coming from industry, that's really shocking. It's just shocking. And I remember We were just choosing a new hotel to have our recruitment fair. And I remember going around the guest rooms with the hotel manager and saying, can that bed be pushed to the wall, please? And then I had all of these school banners made that could be put in front of the bed, right? I'm sure many people were laughing at me like, who's this chick? She's new on the block and she has no clue. But I was so uncomfortable with this. But then I later realized so was everybody else. So it wasn't just oh yeah, sure, we'll do this. Thankfully, I can see that that's shifted now. And I don't think it happens a lot anymore, certainly not at our meetings anymore. Anyway, we create spaces to make sure that interviews can take place in a more suitable location.
We laugh about it a little bit now, but it wasn't that long ago, right, that was happening. There's a thread that's coming through a lot of your answers, and I think certainly with recruitment is the idea of framing it through a lens of being human and humanizing the process, being cognizant of who's on the other end of it. If you have a panel of people and there's one person staring all of you down, how are you going to engage that person so they feel comfortable and they're being their best selves in that experience?
I see so many different and in such variety in terms of interviewing. Panels are good because they're supposed to ask the same questions of every candidate so that it's equitable and fair, and you're getting to the same detail with every single candidate. That can take away from the story piece at times. And so the clue is, and this is an art, to keep to the panel questions and keep your panel on track, yet still allowing the candidates tell their story. I would really urge people to think about that, because it seems to me at the moment it's one or the other. So either you have a wonderful conversation, but then there hasn't been any measurement guidelines in there, like it's just been a wonderful conversation, or it's just questions fired at you so that you can be scored according to a matrix.
I have so many more questions about recruitment because I've worked with ISS. It's always been around recruitment. Could you give a quick overview of some of the other pieces that you do? Because you also support the startup of schools.
We do. I think over 7 decades of experience in international schools, ISS has also evolved, again, according to school needs. So we have our school management and operations division. So they help open a school, manage a school, direct a school, consult with a school. It could be through investors opening a school and they need the support of educators to come and help them set that all up. We can do that, but also from the finance, business, HR perspective as well. So very broad work there, but a lot of consultancy also around governance and what good schools should look like. And of course, the accreditation help. We could go on and on and on. So that whole school piece. We run foundations for many schools through our headquarters in Princeton. So we support the foundations. We have our school supply unit. So we call it the Amazon of school supply for schools. Didn't want to plug them there, actually. Excuse me. For those schools who want to order things, particularly from the US or from Europe, we can do that. We have a huge warehouse in New Jersey where we've a team that's been working with ISS for the longest time, who takes such pride in making sure these shipments get out on time, right, to schools. And it's been lovely to watch. I've had the pleasure of seeing that in action and how that happens, and seeing something arrive at a school and be able to take a photograph for them at the school and send it back to, this is what has happened. Our professional development, we've already talked about. Our leadership and teacher recruitment, of course, are the things that we're known for as well.
You've spoken a lot about leadership over the last 30 minutes or so. You see leadership in so many different ways, in so many different areas of the globe and different school contexts. Can you highlight some specific skills or attributes or attitudes of what you would call highly effective leaders? Is it really about servant leadership, relational leadership? Is that where the rubber hits the road, or is it more contextual depending on what a school needs at the time? Can you talk to us a little bit about leadership from where you stand?
Great leadership isn't about one personality type or style. It's about self-awareness, relational depth, and the ability to lead with both the head and the heart. The most effective leaders I've seen are values-driven. We've talked about that. They listen well. They build trust quickly, but not superficially. They know when to step back and when to step in, and they understand context, and that's also including cultural context, which can be missed sometimes. They don't arrive with a one-size-fits-all playbook. All teachers fear that. In my last school, I did.
Yeah.
And they read the room, and they build the team, and they grow the culture. And you talked about, servant leadership. I don't know that it's on the rise, that it's been there. I think people are coming into themselves as servant leadership. I think that might be a better way of articulating it. And I think that schools are recognizing that sustainable change doesn't come from directives. It comes from the connections. It's not just about being liked or being empathetic. It's about making those tough decisions, holding boundaries, and keeping people aligned to the purpose. But people obviously need to know that purpose beforehand, but then keeping that at the face and the forefront of everything they do. Quality leadership in this area is about integration, blending strategy with care, systems with humanity. And, no matter the context, these are leaders who leave a legacy of learning and belonging.
Again, you've left us in a situation where we're feeling hopeful for the international schools that we work at. And I can see why your organization has lasted 7 decades. That's amazing because you keep adapting, changing, working to address the needs of international schools and the communities.
I don't know how often you're on a plane, but you're on a plane a lot and you travel all over the world. It's interesting for us to hear about what your next 3, 4, 5 months looks like. Are you going to get a break? What does the next few months look like for you?
Actually, you've caught me at a time of year that I'm not in a plane. So I think I may have one more trip this school year, but not sure. But otherwise, I'm pretty done until probably October.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful.
That's what I know now. And as I, mentioned before, we work with schools. And so when schools need you to come, you come. So you don't always know that. I know the conferences usually that I'm going to go at and I want to present at and the communities I'd like to meet with. But yeah, that's what keeps the job so interesting because you just never know. And I have to say, I never tire of flying. I never tire of going to the airport. When I get to Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, I'm like, here I go again. What adventures am I going to have? Who am I going to meet? What friendships am I going to build for the future? Who am I going to support? How am I going to listen carefully and deeply to make sure that we're going to make that world of difference that ISS wants to do?
Pauline, we've really enjoyed this conversation. If anybody from our audience wants to contact you, what's the best way to contact you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm probably most active on, and through our website, you can contact me as well, or through email. Those details are there, and we can provide those perhaps in the show notes.
Absolutely. We will definitely do that.
This has been joyful for us. For me in particular, for at least a decade, maybe almost 2 decades now, I've seen you present at conferences. We've connected in conferences, and I always get so much learning from you, and it's always a joyful experience. So this was awesome, and I really want to say thank you for taking the time with us today. And I hope you get a little bit of time this summer to recharge and to get ready for what's coming your way next school year.
Thank you so much, Pauline.
The thanks is mine. As you probably guessed, I could go on and on about the things I'm passionate about all day, but I really appreciate the opportunity. And if there's anybody out there who requires our help, we are here to support and happy to do so.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pauline. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Skies Leadership Podcast. Do you know a specific leader who would be a great guest? Fill out all the details at blueskiesleadership.com.